Some objects from the day Jesus was crucified still exist today. They have been analyzed by scientists, dated, studied, and what they found still has no explanation. In this video, you're going to see 9 of these objects and understand why the world has never been able to forget that Friday afternoon. 1. The tomb of Jesus in Jerusalem. For nearly 2,000 years, a heavy question has hovered over the Christian faith. It wasn't a theological question. It was a question of stone and earth. Did the tomb really exist? Millions of pilgrims have visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem over the centuries, but beneath all that devotion, there was doubt. Sealed beneath a massive slab of marble that no one had touched for 500 years. Until 2016. That year, a team of archaeologists received historic permission to remove the stone for the first time in half a millennium. With extreme care, they lifted the first layer of marble. Underneath, there was another slab, older, with a roughly carved cross, the mark of someone who, centuries ago, wanted to record that they knew exactly where they were standing. They lifted the second slab, and there it was, the original rock of the cave. The dating was conclusive, 1st century AD, the exact time of Jesus of Nazareth. The tomb was authentic, but the greatest discovery wasn't what they found, it was what wasn't there. The body of Jesus was not in the tomb. And for Christians, this is not just any absence. It is the central proof of everything. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Luke 24, 5-6. Think about this historical fact. No other founder of a major religion has an empty tomb. And even the earliest opponents of the Christian message never denied this fact. They debated what happened to the body, but they never denied that it was gone. That emptiness is the heart of Christianity, the identification of the site, after centuries of wars and destruction, has a name, Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine. At nearly 80 years old, she arrived in Jerusalem in 326 AD with a single goal, to find the places where Christ had walked, suffered, and risen. She found the tomb, and Constantine ordered the construction of a basilica to protect that ground forever. Today, anyone who enters the burial chamber must bow. The entrance is too low to walk through upright. You stand tall to reach Calvary, but you must bend down to enter the tomb, as if the space itself were teaching something. To enter the greatest mystery of all, you must first make yourself small. If you enjoy this kind of content, leave a like now. It helps this video reach more people. And if the tomb is empty, is there anything that can show who was inside? The next object is perhaps the most astonishing of all. 2. The Shroud of Turin. Those who know the Shroud of Turin believe it may be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. In 1898, an amateur photographer named Secondo Pia was given what seemed like a simple task. Photograph a piece of cloth, an old yellowed cloth, just over 14 feet long, kept for centuries in an Italian cathedral. There were dark stains on its surface that, to the naked eye, were barely distinguishable. Secondo took the photograph. He brought the plate into the darkroom to develop it, and stepped back, not out of fear, but out of pure shock, because what looked like a vague blur on the cloth became something completely different in the photographic negative. The detailed face of a man, the full body of a crucified man, with anatomical precision that no medieval artist could ever have achieved. Secondo stood there in the darkness for several long minutes. He knew what he was holding could change everything. And it did. That cloth became known as the Shroud of Turin. Since that night in 1898, it has become the most studied and most disputed object in human history. The Gospel of John records the burial with almost surgical precision. They took Jesus' body and wrapped it in linen cloths with the spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. John 19:40. But there's a detail most people overlook. When Peter arrived at the tomb on the morning of the resurrection, what he found was not a disturbed grave. The linens were still there, lying in place. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the cloth that had been over Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. John 26:7. A grave robber would not stop to fold the cloth. A body taken in haste would not leave everything arranged. This detail has always troubled scholars, not by what it shows, but by the lack of a logical explanation. When scientists examined the image on the cloth, they found something unsettling. The nail marks were not in the palms, but in the wrists. the only anatomically viable point to support the weight of a crucified body without tearing through the flesh. This detail was unknown in the Middle Ages. All medieval art shows nails in the palms, not the wrists. So how could a supposed 13th century forger know something that forensic science would only confirm in the 20th century? The question remains, and the greater mystery. No study has been able to explain how the image was formed. It is not a painting. There is no pigment. It is a chemical alteration on the surface of the linen fibers, a mark that modern science still cannot reproduce. No theory fully explains it. 3. The Spear of Longinus. It was a Friday afternoon. The sky had darkened over Golgotha, not with clouds, but with weight, the kind of silence that comes before something the world will never forget. 3 men were hanging on crosses. The man in the middle was no longer moving. The soldiers broke the legs of the other 2 to hasten their deaths. But when they came to him, they stopped. He was already dead. Then one of the soldiers took a spear and pierced Christ's side. One of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. John 19:34. Modern doctors have studied this detail. The most accepted explanation: the spear pierced the pericardium, the sac surrounding the heart, where fluid accumulates after severe trauma. Blood from the heart, water from the pericardial fluid. A precise medical detail, recorded by a first-century fisherman with no scientific training. Early Christian communities called that soldier Longinus. He was likely the centurion in charge of the execution, trained to kill without hesitation, to obey without question. But when he looked up at the man he had just pierced, he saw an impossible darkness over Jerusalem, felt the earth tremble, and the words came out before he even realized. Truly, this man was the Son of God. Mark 15:39. The executioner had become a witness. The spear passed through empires and obsessions. Today, 3 different relics claim to be the original. The most famous is in Vienna, in the Hofburg Museum. In 1909, a failed young Austrian visited the museum. He stood in front of the spear, silent, for a long time. His name was Adolf Hitler. He later wrote that standing before that spear, he felt a force he could not name, a conviction that whoever possessed it would be invincible. Decades later, when he annexed Austria into the Third Reich, one of his first orders was to transfer the spear to Nuremberg as a talisman, as if forged iron from the 1st century could grant dominion over the world. But the spear gave him no victory. On the day the Allies recovered it, Adolf Hitler died. The true power of that spear was never in the metal. It was in what it revealed. 4. The Crown of Thorns. In April 2019, the entire world watched live as a cathedral burned. Flames rose through Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The central spire collapsed in a shower of sparks. Crowds along the Seine wept. And among Christians around the world, one question echoed. What about the crown? Will the crown survive? A group of Roman soldiers in a closed courtyard, bored, cruel, in the way only unchecked power allows, twisted thorny branches together, formed a ring, and pressed it onto Jesus' head. They twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head, and kneeling before him, they mocked him. Matthew 27:29. What was meant to be ultimate humiliation would become one of the most preserved Christian objects in history. For over 1,000 years, the crown remained in Constantinople, untouched, protected by walls and armies. Until the 13th century, when the Byzantine emperor, buried in debt, made a shocking decision. He used the crown of thorns as collateral for a loan in Venice, a sacred relic, pawned in a bank. Louis IX of France redeemed it. He paid the equivalent of 3 years of royal revenue. He entered Paris barefoot in a solemn procession, carrying the crown with his own hands. And to house it, he built the Sainte-Chapelle, an entire cathedral of glass and light, built for one purpose, to be worthy of what it held. But here is the detail that shatters the image in your mind. The crown is not what paintings show. It is not a dramatic ring of long, piercing thorns. What exists today is a simple circle of woven reeds, about 8 inches in diameter. The thorns were removed and distributed. What remains is humble, small, almost insignificant. Science has examined it. Reeds consistent with the Jordan Valley, dated to the 1st century AD. Exactly what you would expect from something improvised by bored soldiers in a Roman courtyard. As Notre Dame burned, Jean-Marc Fournier entered the cathedral. not to save walls, but to save the crown. When he emerged holding the relic intact, Paris stopped. The crown survived empires, a Venetian bank, and the fire of Notre Dame. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men. 1 Corinthians 1:25. 5. The nails of the crucifixion. For centuries, painters and sculptors repeated the same image without question. Jesus on the cross, nails through his palms. It was everywhere. Altars, cathedrals, books. No one doubted it. Until 1968, archaeologists, excavating a tomb on the outskirts of Jerusalem, found something that turned that image upside down. Inside a first-century skeleton, there was an 18-centimeter iron nail still piercing the heel bone of a crucified man. It was the first direct archaeological evidence of Roman crucifixion, and the research went further. In crucifixions, nails were driven through the wrists, the only point strong enough to support the body's weight without tearing through flesh. And on the Shroud of Turin, the marks are on the wrists, not the palms. A detail medieval art got wrong, but preserved accurately on a cloth no one can explain. And when they came to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him. Luke 23:33, 3 words, hiding calculated brutality. Thick, uniform nails, forged to hold and to maximize agony. Every attempt to breathe on the cross increased the suffering. It was an instrument of slow death, designed to humiliate as much as to kill. What happened to those nails? Helena of Constantinople found them in Jerusalem and gave them to her son, Constantine the Great. But Constantine didn't store them in a cathedral. He used them. One nail was set into his imperial crown. Another was forged into the bridle of his warhorse. The most powerful emperor in the world chose to carry the instrument of Christ's torture, not as a trophy but as a shield. Far be it from me to boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. Galatians 6:14. 6. The true cross. 3 crosses, and no one knew which one was Jesus's. That was the real problem Helena of Constantinople faced in 326 AD. When excavations at Calvary were completed, 3 Roman execution crosses were found, preserved for 3 centuries. According to tradition, they brought the body of a man who had just died. They placed each cross near him, one by one. The first, nothing. The second, nothing. The third, the man opened his eyes. Before reaching that wood, Jesus had carried the crossbeam through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. About 110 pounds on shoulders already torn and exhausted. At one point, the soldiers saw he could no longer continue. They pulled a man from the crowd, Simon of Cyrene. He carried the cross without asking, without choosing, without understanding what had been placed on his shoulders. Sometimes God places a weight on us that only eternity will explain. Constantine ordered the cross to be divided. Fragments were sent to Jerusalem, Rome, and Constantinople. Centuries later, skeptics mocked the idea, saying there were so many relics of the true cross that combined, they could build a ship. But there was a problem. In the 19th century, a researcher cataloged all verified fragments worldwide, measured them, weighed them, calculated the total volume. It wasn't even enough to form a complete cross. The argument that had circulated for centuries was simply false, and the numbers proved it. Today in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you can climb the stairs to Calvary. The rock where the cross stood is still there, visible through glass. You can place your hand into the very hole where 2,000 years ago, the wood that carried the Son of God was set. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. 1 Corinthians 1:18. 7. The Holy Stairs. In Rome in the year 1510, a German monk traveled in search of peace for his troubled soul. One day he came upon a staircase, 28 steps of white marble. Tradition required that it be climbed on one's knees, with prayer at each step. The monk obeyed. He climbed each step with his knees on the cold stone. But when he reached the top, he stood up, looked down, and whispered a sentence that would change the history of the Western world forever. Who knows if this is true? His name was Martin Luther. That moment of silent doubt on those steps became the spark that years later ignited the Protestant Reformation, dividing Christianity in a way that still remains today. But what staircase was this? So important that it drew pilgrims and monks from all across Europe. The Scala Sancta, the Holy Stairs, were not built in Rome. They came from the Praetorium of Pontius Pilate in Judea. These were the very 28 steps Jesus is believed to have climbed, already beaten, crowned with thorns, bleeding, to stand before the representative of the Roman Empire. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" John 18:33. Those stones witnessed the moment when the fate of humanity was sealed in a human court. Helena of Constantinople arranged their transport in 326 AD, a staggering logistical feat for the 4th century. After centuries of wear from pilgrims, Pope Innocent XIII ordered the marble covered with walnut wood in 1723. For nearly 300 years, no one saw the original stone. Until 2019, when restorers removed the wood, the marble beneath was deeply worn, not by tools, but by the friction of flesh and fabric from over 1,000 years of uninterrupted devotion. In 3 specific places, dark stains had penetrated the stone. Tradition says they are drops of Christ's blood, shed as he climbed, exhausted, to hear his sentence of death. Scientific tests on these stains remain debated. The mystery continues. 8. The tunic of Trier. Everyone knows the cross. Almost everyone has heard of the shroud. But there is an object most people have never heard of, made of nothing more than thread and worn fabric, almost invisible in history. And yet, it was the only earthly possession of Jesus for which Roman soldiers literally cast lots at the foot of the cross. The Gospel of John pauses in the middle of the crucifixion to record a detail that seems trivial amid so much horror. The garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. John 19:23. Seamless. At that time, garments made in a single piece were rare and valuable. The soldiers understood that immediately. If they tore it into 4 parts, the fabric would unravel and lose all value. So at the foot of the cross, while the Son of God suffered above them, they sat on the ground and rolled dice. Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it will be. John 19:24. The scene is unsettling in its absolute indifference. They ignored the salvation of the world unfolding above their heads to gamble for a piece of cloth. The trail of that tunic reappears in Trier, in present-day Germany, one of the capitals of the Roman Empire. In the 4th century, Helena of Constantinople is said to have found it and sent it there. For centuries, it was sealed within the altar of the cathedral, hidden from invasions and medieval wars. Only in 1512 was the stone seal broken and the tunic rediscovered. Rare scientific examinations revealed extremely ancient fibers in the deepest layers and confirmed something remarkable. The central core has no seam. Today, it is kept in a reinforced reliquary and displayed only rarely. The last time was in 2012. When the cathedral doors open, the city pauses. Pilgrims cross continents just to glimpse a worn garment, almost in ruins. The dice were cast at Golgotha, but the garment remained whole. A silent reminder that what Roman brutality tried to strip away ended up clothing history with its greatest mystery. 9. The Holy Chalice. Forget everything cinema has taught you. Forget the solid gold cup glowing with supernatural light, granting immortality to whoever drinks from it. The legend of the Holy Grail is humanity's greatest obsession, disguised as a treasure hunt, and it reached one of its darkest moments in recent history in a way almost no one talks about. In 1940, as Europe was consumed by World War II, Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust and head of the SS, personally led an expedition to the mountains of Montserrat Abbey in Spain. Through a Nazi division dedicated to occultism and ancient history, the Third Reich searched for the Grail with the same feverish conviction that Adolf Hitler had once shown toward the spear of Longinus. They believed the cup of Christ held supernatural power, that the army possessing it would be invincible. They searched the mountains, interrogated monks. They found nothing, because they were looking for an artifact of domination, while the cup at the Last Supper represented the exact opposite. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Luke 22:20. It was not a toast to victory. It was a covenant sealed in blood, a promise of a sacrifice about to happen, and that cup has survived. In the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain, protected inside a reinforced reliquary, rests the Holy Chalice of Valencia. At first glance, it seems to match medieval legends, ornate with gold handles and a base set with precious stones. But look closer. The gold, the jewels, the handles were added centuries later. The original cup, the part that would have touched someone's lips that night, is simple, dark, and strikingly plain, made of polished agate stone. When archaeologists examined it separately from the ornaments, silence filled the room. The polishing technique, the geological origin of the stone, all pointed to a precise period, the 1st century, before or after Christ. Origin, a stone workshop in Palestine, Egypt, or Syria. Scientifically, this humble stone cup from Valencia is the only artifact in the world that perfectly matches the profile of the cup used by Jesus that night. For 2,000 years, kings, crusaders, emperors, and dictators searched feverishly for the Grail, killing and dying, to find a cup that could give them power, victory, and preserved life. But on the only night the real cup truly mattered, the only night it fulfilled its purpose, the man who held it did the exact opposite of everyone who would later search for it. He raised the cup, not to save his life, but to give it away